Dear participants, dear friends, we are happy to welcome you to this 11th Global Digital Encounter dedicated to geographical indications. Geographical indications really brings us at the heart of our mandate in the post-COVID crisis. Geographical indications is the intellectual property right that has been created further to the pandemics of Phylloxera. And therefore, this is really a topic that connects us to what we are currently experiencing. We decided to treat geographical indication because this is a subject that, first of all, suffers much, as many other businesses with the current crisis, and also because geographical indications is a point of tensions in international negotiations. Between some countries, mostly new countries, but not all of them, in particular the US and Europe, and where developing countries are making fascinating advancement as well. So this is an area where there is a recomposition of IP. The IP world is being restructured, the game is being transformed, and this is why the Global Digital Encounter should be at the edge of it. And this is why Professor DeSantis, co-director of the activity with me, and Professor Javier Fernandez, coordinator of the activity with me, we decided, the three of us, that time had come to cover the central issue of geographical indications. For this very presentation, we have invited among the most authoritative persons and colleagues we consider in the world for this topic. And I would do it in order that I see them in my screen. So first, I would quote Justin Hughes from Loyola University in the US, who obviously comes from the anti-GI club. And then, since he is in minority, I think it was due to introduce him first today, a powerful minority still. Then I would wish to introduce Patricia Covarrubias from the University of Buckingham in the UK, but also very active in Latin America and in IP Tango. And as such, we are extremely happy and honored that Patricia, who follows these questions for many years, has decided to come and join us today. We have with us our friend Arul Scalia from the University of Delhi. Arul is a big expert of traditional knowledge and geographical indications. He comes from an area of the world that is making major advancements in this very field, and where the future of the system is really to be considered and to be tested. Last but not the least, we have today as our moderator, Delphine Marie-Vivien, who paves not only the doctrine on geographical indications, but also the way many countries are moving. She's working for CIRAD in Montpellier, which is the institute that dedicates to agricultural research, and in particular to geographical indication from France. But she has been active in projects throughout the world, in particular in the recent years in Vietnam and in India. And as such, she's vice director of the center there, and we are extremely honored and happy that she's with us today to be a presenter and also a moderator. I wouldn't wish to start the encounter before mentioning the various supporters that support not only us as organizers, Professor DeSantis, Professor Javier Fernandez, and myself, but that support our institutions, the Fide Think Tank Foundation from Spain, and the Transatlantic IP Academy that I represent, that pooled their forces for organizing these digital encounters. It is thanks to the numerous supporters that we can have hundreds of participants from all over the world, and we are really grateful to them. We are grateful also to our numerous participants that currently are connected from 70 countries. So I wouldn't wish to keep the floor longer. We want to be really in full academic freedom, revolutionary if needed, conservative if required. And the encounter is now officially open. I will wish to give the floor to my friend Javier Fernandez, who will, as coordinator, also make his message of welcome to all of you.
Thank you very much, Laurent, and thank you to you all for being here with us. I wouldn't spend so much time with presentations, things like that. I think that, as Laurent said, this is an encounter that is necessary because the future that is before us will say to us how necessary is the people that treat the soils, that take care of the fields, etc., to produce something that I like very much, such as wine, cheese, and other products that would make us enjoy the life much more than we have. And also tea and other products that are prepared with care and love by people all around the world. So I think that these people merit and need some support, as they will play an important role in the future. And well, that's why I welcome this encounter, and I will enjoy very much all the interventions of these speakers. Thank you very much for being part of the community. Remember, you are a member of the community, and we will hope to do something for you, and we hope that you participate in our encounter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laurent and Javier. So it's a big honor for me to be both a moderator and a speaker at this very interesting panel. We are all friends, we all know each other, so I'm sure we will enjoy it and try to give our audience the best of geographical indications. So what is geographical indications for? Actually, origin-linked products existed everywhere since the antiquity. In many different industries, we spoke about wine, cheese, but actually it was also used for wood, incense, marble, stones, textiles, whatever. And in those products, for those products, the name of the place of origin is the name used to designate the product. Then, legally speaking, such name was protected as an appellation of origin or a geographical indication, which is legally recognized and as such enjoys some exclusive rights. It was first recognized in the south of Europe, especially in France in 1905. Then it was disseminated in countries members of the Lisbon system, homogenized at the EU level in 1992. And since the TRIPS agreement in 1995, it was broadly extended in all WTO members. So since 1995, we are seeing a tremendous activity regarding GIs. What is GIs? What is the definition precisely? Geographical indications identify a good where a given quality, reputation, or the characteristics of the good is essentially attributable to its geographical origin. Once you protect that name as a GI, only the producers located in the area making the product complying with the GI specification can use the name protected as a GI. So GI grants an exclusive right of use to the producers. Well, GIs are not for any local products. They are only for products having a qualitative link with their place of origin. Indeed, GIs are the recognition of a cultural heritage, the special relation between people, the local community, place, and product. Therefore, such a quality or reputation of the product, its method of production, the geographical area of production, must be clearly defined in what we usually call a specification or code of practices or rules of use. And those rules need to be controlled to be sure the product is authentic. Well, 25 years after TRIPS now, where GIs compared to other intellectual property rights is an area much less harmonized, negotiated in the context of a hot debate between the new world and the old world. It's time to ask, where are we? Before getting into the debate itself, some figures, although not exhaustive, to show you what is the situation right now. Starting from the east in Asia, which is a very dynamic continent regarding GIs, just looking at the 10 countries of ASEAN, it's more than 400 GIs which have been registered since TRIPS agreements. Just looking at India, we have Ahul with us today to testimony of this, it's 370 GIs in India, almost 100 in Japan, and just looking at China, it's over 8,000. Then moving to the west, looking at Central Europa, for example, in Georgia, where there are many wines, you have over 50 GIs. In Turkey, almost 300 GIs also. And of course, in the European Union, which is the bastion for geographical indication, it's more than 3,200 GIs which have been registered. Also moving more to the south, going to Africa, there are more and more GIs registered. Just looking at West African countries, it's 5 right now. And now moving completely to the west, to the countries of Patricia and Justin. In South America, Chile has more than 130, 17 Brazil, and almost 50 in the 4 countries of the Andean community. Even in North America, where there is still some debate about the efficiency of geographical indication protection, there are a lot of GIs for wines, but not only for wines, so it's above 300 GIs actually protected in the US, and even more than 30 in Canada. So just to show you with those, brief pictures of figures, that it's a trend which is increasing. What is also interesting now at the international scene is that GIs were first mainly used to designate wines and food products, but now it's increasingly used to protect names of handicraft products, especially in India, where 2/3 of the GIs are for non-agri products. Another issue is the international trade, because as for any intellectual property right, GIs need to be registered in every country of export. But contrary to other intellectual property rights, besides the registration in the foreign country according to the direct procedure, the national legal framework, there are some trade agreements which are signed by countries to enforce their GIs abroad. This is very unique in the field of intellectual property rights because you have a list of GIs attached to those agreements. And this trend has increased a lot since the last 1990s, just now with the EU having signed 36 trade agreements with chapters on geographical indication. Well, in this context of wide implementation of GI system and GI registration of products, it is time to have a more in-depth look at what are the benefits, but also the challenges faced by GIs to deliver their promises. More particularly, during this encounter, we will look at 3 issues regarding GIs. The first issue will be about the impact of GI. Which role can be played by geographical indications in promoting sustainable development? I propose to consider several impacts of GIs when raising this issue. Of course, impacts in terms of benefits for local producers, improvement of livelihood and value chain structuration. Also impacts in terms of guarantee for consumers of quality and diversity of products. Impacts in terms of rural and territorial development, and impacts in terms of protection of traditional know-how and biodiversity. The second topic of the encounter will be about the extension of geographical indication to protect non-food products, especially handicraft goods. Which issue is behind this extension? Last question of the encounter will be on the international protection of geographical indication, and in particular, this practice of signing FTAs. Does it bring any benefit to GI smallholders, or does it make things more complicated for them to enforce their rights? Let's start with the first topic of discussion of this encounter. What are the impacts of geographical indications? What is the role played by geographical indications. Looking just at economic value of GI products, and actually in the EU, where the practice is quite old, it's interesting to know that within the last decade, the total value of GI product has increased sharply. It was 55 billion euro in 2010, and it increased up to 75 billion euro in 2017. That means a big business for European products and European producers. Then just looking at the value premium rate in the EU, in general, the GI products benefit from an added value of 1.5, while the value premium rate is for wines 2.3. So here again, a quite big increase of the price for those GI products. Looking outside the European Union, we also have some success stories. If you look at Cambodia, the famous compote paper is still sold at the price of $15 at the farm gates, while the price of regular paper from Cambodia, but from other producing countries, has dropped sharply to $3 per kilogram. So it's 5 times more for the paper, which is under a geographical indication. In Africa, the same with the paper from Cameroon, Panja paper, which has its price tripled from €7 to €18 per kilogram, with also an increase of the surface cultivated and increase in productivity. Looking at other impacts, if you look at the Ahmed salt from Bali in Indonesia, thanks to the geographical indication, the traditional knowledge, the traditional method of making that salt was preserved, facing other industrial method of production. The same in Vietnam with the fish sauce from Phu Quoc. It was a traditional recipe that was put into the specification and preserved the local environment. Still, there are some drawbacks. Not every GI is successful. And of course, you need to have a product with a specific quality, with reputation, but most important is to have an involvement of the local community and strong motivation of the value chain stakeholders. And it has to be said that it's not always the case. Looking at all those tremendous figures of numbers of GIs registered, not all of them are successful. And looking more particularly at Asia, many GIs have been registered, but the collective dynamic of producers in managing and using their GI is still under progress, because we are here in countries under state-driven top-down regime. So it's important to have success of GIs, to have a good balance between motivation, involvement of the local communities of producers, and support from the public authorities. I will open the floor and discussion from that statement about what makes GI successful, and give the floor to Justin for 3 minutes. Please, Justin.
Well, thank you for including me in today's encounter, and geographical indications are a fascinating and wonderful subject matter. But I have to tell everyone in the audience right away that you need to understand that among things in intellectual property, geographical indications are a very small world. Delphine told you there are 100 GIs in Japan. There are over 1,000 trademark applications every day in Japan. 8,000 GIs in China. Go look see how many daily trademark applications there are in China. I will imagine it's more than the total number of GIs that exist in toto. Geographical indications are interesting and important, but a relatively very tiny area of intellectual property world. Now, for me, geographical indications are important for helping farmers, for their potential to help farmers, especially in developing countries. And they can do that through the decommodification of products. And that way they can also help farmers in the EU. So in that sense, a geographical identifier can help raise the price and decommodify an agricultural product in the same way that fair trade or shade grown or dolphin friendly certification marks can. In the United States, we have a huge amount of geographical indicator marketing. I just returned from Hawaii, where we have Kona coffee. This is Peruvian coffee. This is Sumatra coffee. So we spend a lot of time marketing products with geographical indicators. The problem with geographical indications protection, as the EU casts it, is that it is very strong, and the European Union oversells what it does. In the way Delphine just told you that, well, it adds 1.5 times the value to geographical indicators to products. And she pulled back a little bit and said there's a lot of failure stories. Yes, there are. The EU oversells and asks developing countries for protection that imposes more burdens on the developing countries than it gives them benefits. The European Union also asks for what are called clawback lists, words that they want us to give back to them, even though they are used generically in my own country, like Parmesan, and that's a major problem. And finally, the big problem in the international discussion of Europe of geographical indications is not the idea of protecting the geographical indication for the farmer, which is great, but giving the geographical indication this enormous protection, which the Europeans call evocation protection, which means the word can't be used anywhere else, it seems. And this is a problem. This is the reason why New World countries have pushed back so hard against the European Union on some of these issues.
Thank you, Justin, for this comment. We'll come back to your statements. Now I give the floor to Patricia, please.
Thank you very much, Delphine, and of course, Manuel and Laurent for the invitation. I feel with a bit of pressure because I'm representing Latin America. I mean, in South America, Central America. But I feel also proud. It's not only a heavy weight in my shoulder, but proud of where I'm coming from. And the reason is about geographical indications, how proud I am to show my people here in United Kingdom and Europe the amazing things that we do have and we do produce. I think that if you really like a drink, you have heard the word pisco. I'm not going to open the Pandora box in here, whether it is from Chile or Peru, but everybody knows that it comes from Latin America. And the Café de Colombia, the coffee that was first registered, the first foreign product that was registered at the EU level. So yes, we have had many products, and geographical indications is something new in South America and Central America. But it doesn't mean that we don't want to get on with this. As Justin has said, yes, that there are all the certification marks, collective marks, signs that we can still use. But we are fascinated by these geographical indications. It has been sold almost like a magic wand. We can produce many things with this. But by saying production, I don't want to be focusing on only economic and business things, because for me, coming from South America, I see a GI, something that we can exploit by preserving and safeguarding our culture, our identity. So yes, even though we talk about IP system, about monopolizing, for me it's even more than that. For me it's a tool that can be used to safeguard our cultural heritage. Geographical indication, yes, it distinguish, identify a product, but identify a region, identify the people in that region. And yes, in Latin America, we have borrowed the legislation. And that is one of the debates that we have, because by borrowing legislation, perhaps it doesn't fit perfectly well with our society. And here comes a kind of a minestrone, because we use so many different words, so they don't mean the same in the legislations. We are using words such appellation of origin, which comes from the Lisbon Agreement, from the White One International Agreement. But we also use the word geographical indications. And this word came from the TRIPS Agreement, and it's a very generic word. So if we look at the South American, Central American legislation, we identify geographical indications, but geographical indications, we divided them into two. We divided into appellation of origin known in Europe as denomination of origin, but also we identify geographical indications as an indication of source, which is very useful, especially in Brazil. They have plenty in their indication of source. The difference between the two is enormous, because indication of of sorts have a weaker link with the region. Now, one of the disputes that we have regarding these concepts of geographical indications is that everything is about the terroir. I came from that word, the earth, because it was built with the wine and spirits in mind. So when we're talking about South America and Central America, sometimes we don't feel like that because for us it's more about the region. It's not much about the land, it's about the people, the traditional cultural aspects of them. So for me, this topic, as you can see, is fascinating because I feel personally very attached to that. It's a cultural aspect from me every time we talk about a product that comes from Latin America. So hopefully this dispute that we're going to have today, this discussion, is going to enhance how everybody wants the same goal, which is use geographical indications not only as a protection, business talking, but also seeing something more with a geographical indication tool, be it a certification, be it a collective mark, whatever we can use as positive protection and even defensive protection. But I want to remark that in here that for me, geographical indication is a positive tool. It's not for everyone. I get this with Delphine. Geographical indication is not a magic one. It's not for everyone. But we have seen, examples that has been successful. And hopefully we can take the good practice of those and apply those to the products. So thank you, Delphine.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Now I give the floor to Arul. Please, Arul.
Thanks, Delphine, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me for this encounter. So when Laurent was introducing me, I noticed that he made an interesting statement, that is, I come from a jurisdiction which has made substantial contribution to this area and will also play an important role in future, right? So I think that also brings in the question of a need for a critical analysis on what impact GA has made in India in the last couple of years. So to answer that, maybe we need to also ask a couple of questions. So the first one which we should ask is, whom are we protecting through GAs in India? And if I look at the registrations that have happened, so Delphine rightly mentioned that there have been more than 370 applications. I think the current number is 390, if I recall correctly. More than half of the applications are filed by the state. So it's not filed by farmers, it's not filed by any association, it's filed by the state. So are the benefits really going to the people whom the GA should be benefiting? I think that's something which we should be asking ourselves. The second thing is, what are we protecting through GAs in India? So there also, the interesting bit is, as I think Delphine indicated during her initial remark, out of these 390, more than I think 220 are handicrafts. So where I guess the link with the geography might be very, very weak. But I will still tolerate that. But what about GAs, wherein the only rationale for protection is that it is offered as a religious offering at a particular place? Does that justify the grant of GA? So if you look at India, you will see that yes, there have been grant of GAs even for religious offerings. So the example which I would like to specifically mention is Tirupati Laddu. So far, I haven't been able to find even a single rationale for granting GAs like that. Then we also need to look at the fact that in a place like India, maybe because of the over-involvement of the state, GA has also become a subject matter of intense political fight between the states. For example, the state of West Bengal and Orissa were fighting over GA rights over one of the sweet dishes known as Rasagola. And finally, yes, both of them were granted GA. But I still ask, what did they eventually achieve through that political fight? It's not helping any of the producers. It's not helping anyone else. It was just a matter of political fight. When it comes to the question of impact of GA, I think Delphine rightly mentioned that maybe we should also analyze the issue of impact in terms of quality guarantee for consumers. Again, if I look at my jurisdiction, I must say that I have a very disappointing picture to portray. So if you look at most of the GAs, you will notice that maybe due to the absence of collective management, there are no strong quality control measures coming from the side of the producers. So if there are no strong quality control measures coming from the side of the producers, what exactly are we guaranteeing to consumers? So because of all these factors, I would generally say that I cannot say with confidence that GA is making a huge impact in the, at least in my jurisdiction. So maybe we need more studies that can analyze what is going wrong with respect to GA protection in a country like India, and maybe we need to take some corrective measures to ensure that GA can make the kind of impact it was envisaged to make. Thank you, Delphine.
Thank you very much, Arul, for this comprehensive description of the Indian scenario. Before shifting to the second question, just some comment of my side. Of course, there are much more or less geographical indications than trademark, but it doesn't matter because there are so many producers behind one geographical indication. Just Café de Colombia means added value for how many coffee producers, for thousands of coffee producers. The same with the Pashmina shawl from Kashmir in India, or the Kanchipuram silk geographical indication on India. It's more than 12,000 weavers of that particular silk. So most important is to see what benefits can be brought to those local communities, to those producers, to those artisans, more than the numbers of GIs itself. And indeed see how Patricia was saying, how to make from the success stories, I mean, a good password for other GIs to be successful as well. And sure, control mechanisms are heavy to put in place. You need to control that the method of production is complying with the specification, that the characteristic of the product is indeed what is expected by the consumer and also complying with the GI specification. But because you have all those constraints, because you have this specification, because you have this collective action, because you have this control of quality of the product, this is also why, not only in the EU, but in the majority of countries, there's a higher protection for GIs compared to trademark, because it's a collective rights. You are protecting the heritage of a community. So indeed, there are so many constraints for those communities to fulfill that at the end you get a higher protection. Moving now to the second topic, which is about whether it is justified to extend geographical indications to non-food products. And so here in particular to handicraft, whether it is in the area of textile or whatever, wood handicraft, whatever. Why is there a problem? Well, the problem is that in the EU, the regulation is yet only for food products. So when third countries like India wants to get their GIs protected in the EU, they don't have any legal framework to get those GI protected, whether it's for silk, wood, or whatever. And why is there any problem? Is it that the link to the territory through culture is not as strong as the link to the territory through nature? Because for many handicraft products, the raw material is not necessarily local. You have this local sourcing of raw material for the appellation of origin or denomination of origin that is in place in many countries in South America. So for those countries, whether it's textile from particular community in Colombia or ceramica in many countries in South America, if the local raw material is sourced locally, then you can have a geographical indication or denomination of origin. But in the EU, it's still a problem. So I would like to ask our panelists, what do you think of having this extension of GI to any kind of product, like for any intellectual property right, actually, which is open to any kind of goods? And please, who wants to start with this question of extending the GIs for non-food products? Again, Justin, you want to start on this?
I can start on this if you want, but this is not an area of my study, but I'll start on this. First of all, I will tell you, Delphine, you may be surprised to know, I'm in favor of this. But the reason I'm in favor of this is this puts to rest or helps bury the mythology of terroir. That terroir, this idea that the land produces some unique taste in a cheese, the land produces some unique taste in a wine, the seashore or the harbor produces some unique taste in a sea salt. That has been part of the mythology of geographical indications. And when we move into handicrafts, we are pushing back away from that terroir idea. Now, I believe in terroir as a matter of science, but terroir as a matter of science has never matched up with how people in the legal world advocate for terroir as a basis of geographical indication protection. So I'm greatly in favor of its extension. And frankly, as we extend geographical indication protection to handicrafts, it becomes very clear that geographical indications are what we, the Americans, have always known them to be. They're just certification marks. They're a kind of trademark that Americans call certification marks, and Canadians call certification marks, and the Japanese call certification marks. And that's all they really are. So I'm all in favor of using certification marks as a way to try to protect indigenous traditions, to protect local communities, to raise the standards, or to ensure the quality of what they're produced, to protect them from rip-offs and counterfeits that many come from East Asia of Latin American folkloric products. So I'm all in favor of that. But I think the extension of GIs for a GI advocate, for someone who is passionate about GIs as a theoretical construct, it's a problem because, as you said, Delphine, it doesn't seem to have the same kind of connection that is at the root of the traditional theory of appellations of origin. I have 30 seconds more, so I'll just say for our audience, what is interesting about this is when you follow the kind of historical flow of geographical indications or appellations of origin to geographical indications, you see a conceptual evolution, as you do in most areas of law. And this conceptual evolution right now, part of it is a kind of slow moving away from the terroir idea, which was so powerful in the 1980s, 1990s. But this was something that even was starting back then. I'll stop there. That's 3 minutes, Delphine.
Yeah, thank you very much, Justin. Patricia, do you want to jump into these questions of
yes,
or not to put it, please?
Yes, absolutely. My favorite topic, handicraft. I also love my cheese and my wine, of course, but handicraft is something very close to my heart. But before that, something that captured my attention with the first question, it was one of the answers given by Arul, and I would like to address those as well. First, one question that he put forward in the case of India was, who is benefiting from it? And I have to say that I have the same reservations in Latin America. Who is really benefiting from geographical indications? Because politics, populists, and policies, there is indeed an operational risk in Latin America when we put this together. So yes, I am with Arul on these apprehensions about who is really benefiting from geographical indications. And another thing that Arul mentions in India, it was about whether he could see personally or with his experience successful cases, economically speaking or not. And again, the same could be applicable to Latin America about whether, yes, there are a few cases of many. We would like to see more cases. But one of the things that I see as a positive with geographical indications, as I said before, I'm not looking specifically to the business. Of course, money is important. But what I'm looking at here is how local communities are coming together. And I like that part very much because we are like taking possession and feeling proud, which I love, feeling proud of what we make. I don't know why in Latin America, we love to have something which is foreign. You know, we love a cheese that comes from France. We love the wine that comes from Italy and things like that. And we sometimes forget to appreciate the things that we can produce. So I think geographical indication in that sense, I see it as a benefit because we as a local communities come together and reflect on that. So going to then the second question, Delphine, sorry, about handicraft. I support this 100%. I have written on this, especially with the EU, specifically free trade agreements. EU have free trade agreements and cooperation agreements with Central America, have those with Chile, another one with the Andean countries, Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. And we see that in the table of negotiations of geographical indications. For example, in the case of Colombia, Colombia has like 40% of the products registered under geographical indications are handicraft. handicraft. So when they sat in the table of negotiations, okay, 40% of my products will not be recognized in Europe. And that's one of the examples in how we need to have a fair table of negotiations in that sense, okay, about a handicraft. What I'm talking here is about traditional handicraft, because handicraft is or are the means of livelihood for several communities in Latin America. Why? 8% of Latin Americans are indigenous people. The artisan sector is humongous in Latin America. It's an informal business. So it's something that we need to start establishing routes, certifications, protections to that informal market that exists. So I am with Justin. I'm pro handicraft. I'm not sure about the comment Justin was saying about terroir, the theory of terroir. Yes, as I mentioned before, and Justin said we have this situation of the taste and the flavors of the terroir. But I think that with handicraft, we also could apply that. Why? Because terroir is about the environment. And terroir is also about the environment and the people that works the land. So if we think about handicraft is produced, if we are thinking about products in Colombia, hats, for example, they come from a plant. So we need that plant that is built, or built is not a word, that is harvested in a particular region. So still there is that connection with a region. What I will say, however, is when we are talking about traditional handicraft that are connected to indigenous peoples, because in Latin America, there is displacement of those indigenous people. So if they were in a particular region, they will be displaced for any cause, could be violence, could be for oil producers, could be guerrilla, could be many things. They will be displaced, so which means that terroir will not exist anymore. But I'm interested to know more about that. Geographical indications also connects to traditional knowledge. It's not just about the terroir, it's about traditional knowledge. So every time I see a negative, I'm trying to find a positive, and that will be the ending. Delphine, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, because we have now Ahud, who is specialist in traditional knowledge. Can you please do your view on this GIS for non-food sector?
So, Delphine, I mean, when we look at the issue of protection of handicrafts, particularly in the Indian context, let me first say the positive side. So, on the positive side, as I think you have also pointed out through multiple papers and so on, yes, these kinds of GIs on handicrafts have a positive impact on traditional knowledge holders. But I see it in a slightly different way. I'm not seeing it purely from an economic perspective, but from a non-economic perspective, because many a times when a community receives a GI protection for their handicraft, it's a kind of a non-monetary reward for them. So that's something that gives them kind of self-esteem among the public, right? So to that extent, yes, I would agree that yes, extension of GI to things like handicrafts have huge advantage. But on the other side, India has like 220 handicrafts registered out of 390 total GIs in India. But again, one of the things wherein I would really struggle is in how many of those GI registered can we show economic benefits going to the concerned community. I haven't seen really good data on this, and my feeling is also generally, I mean, based on I would say the minimal amount of data which I have, I would say that not a substantial amount is going to the concerned community. Again, this is partly due to the fact that most of the registrations are done from the side of the state or with the push of the state rather than it's coming from the side of the community. So unless and until that changes, I won't be able to see much economic justifications for granting or extending GI to handicrafts. But again, I re-emphasize on the other non-monetary aspects, I also see benefits because it's actually making the traditional knowledge holders proud about their artwork. So to that extent, yes, it is making a contribution.
Thank you very much, Ahul, for your contribution. So just to make a short summary, We all agree that actually non-food products deserve also GI protection because there's a link with the territory, either we call it terroir or not. Cultural links are very important with the place, and they deserve protection as much as food products. So if we have a GI regenerative system for food products, it should be the same for non-food products. And in France, non-food GIs are protected through a specific legal framework since 2015. Now it's 12 GIs which has been registered like this, and they're very happy to have a GI regenerative system beyond the certification trademark and collective trademark they were using before, because they have a bigger protection of the name alone. Whatever the logo combined with the name is used, the name alone is protected. They don't have to face this first in time, first in right, and so they get much better protection for the local artisans community. The sui generis GI system for them, it's really an improvement compared to what they had before, which was only the collective trademark or certification trademark, with certification trademark being the problem that the producers are not behind it. It's a third-party certification body. Well, now it's time to move to our third questions of this encounter, which is this practice of having trade agreements signed by countries, actually by all the countries represented here around the table in this encounter, that facilitates the protection of geographical indications at the international level. It's very different from registering them through the regular procedure. We have very short time to discuss that issue, so thank you for being brief. Justin, do you want to start with what are the benefits and opportunities, or on the contrary, the difficulties with those FTAs?
Delphine, why does the white guy have to start every time?
Oh.
I actually think that's a little not the right way to cast things, but let me defer to Patricia or Arul right now, and I'll come back for a very short one.
Arul and Patricia, do you have any?
Yes, absolutely. I will build upon what I have already said, because you said it has to be brief, okay? Which is bilateral trade agreements that has been signed with the EU between Andean countries and Central America. We have, a string of words. We don't know what is an appellation of origin, denomination of origin, geographical indications. So there are many things. There are many terms that perhaps are mixed. One of the things that captured my attention was the annex of the free trade agreement with Europe, the one that was signed with Colombia, Peru, and then signed by Ecuador. It was about 200 geographical indications in generic terms allowed to be produced or exploited with those names of geographical indications in those countries in Latin America. And what captured my attention was that those geographical indications were several denominations of origin. There were geographical indications, and there were TSGs, which has a weakest link. By the time that was signed, Colombia only recognized two geographical indications, which were denominations of origins and indications of source. Please bear in mind that in some countries in South America, you don't need to register indications of source. You only protect them under unfair competition law. So by doing that, they were integrating into Colombia and Peru all these geographical indications with the strongest and highest protection equally to a denomination of origin, when in fact they were not given those rights to their national products. So that is a negative that I see when we signed that agreement. But as always, I like to end in a positive note. And the positive note about these trade agreements that I saw is that those products that were here in Latin America, they were having the highest protection in Europe. Because remember, the TRIPS agreement gives high protection, meaning high protection that nobody can say that is like or the style of champagne or type champagne, some things like that. Well, in Colombia, they just said highest protection for wines and spirits, exactly the same as TRIPS. But when they came in here to Europe with their denominations of origins, they were protected in the highest standard. So thank you, Justin, for passing the ball to me.
Well, thank you for your enthusiasm, Patricia. So I think I'm going to skip Justin's contribution now. Arul, do you want to say something about the FTAs? Actually, India started to negotiate one with the EU, but then stopped the negotiations stopped after a couple of years. Do you have any idea why?
So in general, yes, I'm a bit skeptical about these free trade agreements, particularly because if we look at most of those free trade agreements, the developing countries are at a loss. And if you look at specifically the India-specific free trade agreement which you are referring to, I'm not very sure what benefits India would have actually got as a country, as a trading partner from that kind of a free trade agreement. With the specific context of GA, again, I'm a bit skeptical because again, unless and until we have proper economic data on benefits of a higher level of standard for GA protection, we shouldn't be entering into any FTAs that is going to raise the standards of GA protection. So in a nutshell, I'm very much skeptical about FTAs, and I'm only happy that that free trade agreement with EU has been postponed or delayed, I would say, like without any revival in near future.
Okay, thank you, Arul. Justin, you still want to say words of this FTA? There's been one between the EU and the US signed in 2006 with how many? 600 names from the US protected in the EU. See how the Americans are happy to get protection in the EU.
I don't want to talk about the US EU negotiations. What I do want to say is, look, everyone in the audience should understand that one of the reasons these intellectual property standards come up in free trade agreements is because of paralysis at the WTO. And in the case of geographical indications in the TRIPS agreement, geographical indications are quite unique because Articles 22, 23, and 24 are the only place in the TRIPS agreement where it says everyone has to keep negotiating. And the reason it says that is because the European Union was so dissatisfied with what it got out of the TRIPS agreement. So it's natural and completely understandable that because of paralysis there at the WTO, it's reasonable that the European Union would seek these TRIPS plus standards in all of its free trade agreements with other countries. The United States also pursues TRIPS plus standards in different areas of intellectual property in its free trade agreements. Now, and I should say that free trade agreements are also good for pursuing additional new areas. For example, the new United States-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, the replacement of NAFTA, has a chapter on digital trade, something that no one ever thought about in the WTO TRIPS period. So it's completely understandable and forgivable and strategic and reasonable. But Patricia is right that what is often produced is this terrible mismatch of domestic legal concepts from different jurisdictions, because the European Union, like the United States, is going to go into these negotiations and saying, we're not changing our concepts. And so the result will be a mismatch, or as Patricia had this lovely word, minestrone, of legal concepts, legal protections, legal standards. Maybe that's good that we get a whole bunch of conflicting things out there, and then someday, a generation or two from now, we can sort them out. I don't know. When it comes to geographical indications in the US free trade agreements or preferential trade arrangements, the US is mainly conducting what folks consider a defensive operation to preserve the generic use of many words that American society considers generic. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Justin. And well, keeping on with the pasta, for me, the FTA is more like a spaghetti bowl, where indeed you have a lot of different legal norms applying depending on the FTA. So it can support small producers because they get their GI easily protected abroad. They don't have to go to the procedures of registering, which can be costly. You see, for example, there are now 1,600 GI from third countries which are protected in the EU according to trade agreements. So for those foreign GIs, it's a big chance to get protected in the EU, but then it's depending on each agreement. So it's also complicated for enforcement agencies, because here we're also talking about the right for consumers to get the authentic product. So it means the ability to fight against fake products in the markets. So that will make things, on the one hand, easier for producers. Those FTAs may be more complicated for enforcement agencies and for consumers to know what is the authentic product. Anyway, I'm sure also to answer to Patricia that there will be more and more products. I mean, there's some kind of, you can add new GIs on the FTAs and get your new GIs protected in the counterpart signatory country. Now we stop for the panel among our four, and we go to the questions of the audience. So thank you, Laurent, who has checked the questions, which are quite numerous, in the chat. And there are so many. I will go through the one which has been recommended by Laurent. It's the question from Gabriele Gagliani. So actually, I cannot read the whole question on my screen. So Gabriele is saying that actually there are also many geographical indications and those American viticultural area, for example, for wines produced in Napa Valley. And the question maybe is more for you than Justin, whether the US should not try to adopt a different approach on GIs at the international level, especially to support its own producers. So, and to go beyond only the market-oriented vision. Lisa, do you want to answer this point, Justin?
I do want to answer that because the question comes from Delphine speaking quickly and not wholly accurately. No offense, Delphine.
I cannot read the question.
When Delphine said the United States protects some GIs in wine, what she did not say is the United States fulfills our TRIPS obligations to protect geographical indications through certification mark law and collective mark law. The United States and Australia, for example, have distinct systems to protect alcoholic beverage names that includes wines. And so there is distinct protection of wine names in Australia and the United States, but there is also certification marks and collective marks. So in the United States, we have Florida oranges as a certification mark, Idaho potatoes as a certification mark. So we do have a full-fledged system. Now, I will say that the difference between the system is less government regulation. With a certification mark, the local growers say, these are our standards. They file the standards at the Patent and Trademark Office, and as long as they apply those standards, they have a certification mark. So there is less interaction and negotiation with the government about the standards. That may or may not be good. That's a question of the flavor of government involvement you prefer and the public-private mix you want. I will say, even for that, there are developing countries who find that's too much trouble. We had a fascinating dispute, and Delphine is well aware of it, a few years ago, when the Ethiopians said, we don't want certification marks for our coffee names because we can't really control where the coffee's coming from. We just want plain old trademarks. And we want trademarks. So we want a trademark like General Electric or Coca-Cola for our coffee names because we cannot abide by certification conditions. So that's an example of even the looser system that the United States uses to protect geographical indications being too onerous for some developing country situations. But let me be clear, it's not that we only have GI protection for wines.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Indeed, you have Idaho potatoes, which has been set up also with a public committee under the local government. So the local government is also very much involved in the US. If it's not in examining the content of the rule of use of certification trademark, because this is not part of the trademark system, at least in setting up those rules besides the producers. So I think we have almost the same balance between private stakeholders and public authorities involved in defining the content of the specification for the rule of use. I don't agree on this.
That's not true because, for example, we have a certification mark, Wild Georgia Shrimp. The Georgia state government's not involved. It's open to the local farmers to decide how they want to do it. It's not as in France where you have to go to the Institut National des Appellations d'Origine to get anything done.
Well, it's also the producers who go to the Institut National des Appellations d'Origine and with their own specification. And the national authority is only there to check there is no illegitimate users who have been excluded from the procedure, but it's also on the will of the producers. Well, you also have some standards and labeling rules, which are kind of public regulations to protect GIs in the US. But I want to go back to the questions from the chat. So now I've changed the screen so I can see them better. Laurent, do you advise me any particular question or what do I see? There's so many questions.
Perhaps the question from Octavio Espinosa on enforcement of PDOs versus PGIs.
Okay, at 6 o'clock. So, yes. So can you, it depends in which country. So he's asking whether it's the same level of protection for PDO or PGI. In the EU, it's absolutely the same level of protection. This could be questionable, but it is like this. And in South America, Patricia, do you want to comment whether in countries who do have both denomination of origin and indication de provencia, which is the case in Brazil, actually, whether it is the same enforcement for both?
Yes, absolutely, Delphine. Thank you very much. So there is a difference between a PDO and a PG because PDO has the strongest link with the region because all the stages, all the chain has to be in the same region. A PGI, just one has to be in that particular region, so it has a weakest link. And now I'm playing the weakest link. The question regarding in South America, it depends. For example, as I said, there are some countries in South America in which you don't register an indication of source, which is similar to the GI. But in regards to the enforcement, which is the question put it in here, the protection enforcement is the same if you have a registration, exactly the same as if you have a trademark, collective mark. Yes, you can bring an action for misappropriation of that particular, for an infringement, for a violation of your ownership, because remember at the end of the day, we're talking about ownership if you register. But if you don't register that indication of source, as in many countries in South America, then you will use unfair competition law, which, as you know, is quite a big burden to prove in courts. I will say that, as always in IP, it is better when you have a certification, either a patent or a trademark, or as in here in geographical indication. Talking about enforcement, if you have the certification for both a PDO, a denomination of origin, or indication of procedence or indication of source, if you have registered that, the enforcement is exactly the same. If there is no registration in that country of indication of procedence or source, then you will use unfair competition law. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. So I'm still reading questions from the chat. Just to come back to this question of the state's involvement, if you look at avocado from Florida, Justin, if I'm not mistaken, this is a GI which is protected according to an act passed in the Congress. So it was really a kind of public regulation to determine what is avocado from Florida, what is the geographical area for production, which are the varieties of avocado, etc., isn't it?
Have you ever had an avocado from Florida?
I have to say, recently I'm not buying products outside my local markets.
Have you paid a premium for an avocado from Florida? It's a strange example for you to use because in the United States, almost all the domestically consumed avocados come from California, different place, and a very large percentage of our consumed avocados come from Mexico. I have never ever seen a Florida avocado in a grocery store. But anyway, while you're looking at the chat, I would suggest there's some excellent questions about the value chain. Isn't the real issue about the benefit of geosource indications, how the value chain is organized? And I think a rule that's very important to a rule, it's very important to me, very important to Patricia. And then someone asked me in the chat about how can you decommodify. What does it mean to decommodify through a geographical indication or any certification mark? Those two are intimately related. So I would love to talk about those, maybe, and I think Patricia and Arul might want to talk about how the value chain is organized too.
Patricia, you want to jump on this? Well, I would say value chain may be just a definition. It should include all the actors which are involved in making the products, from the raw material farmers or producers, if it is a handicraft product, up to the processors, and even up to the first traders. So how do we organize this value chain to have benefit sharing of the added value of the GI, up to the first producers, especially the raw material producers? Or the fisherman, if we look at the fish sauce, how the fisherman can benefit from the GI. Who wants to answer that question?
I can jump in. I don't know if I will be answering the question. I think the general question is about the chain of production, the value chain. Is that okay?
Yes, please, yes. Please.
Okay, so I think that is, I don't know if in United States and India or Europe is the same, but I think the most difficult part that I have seen in Latin America is the pre-recognition phase rather than the recognition phase. Even the recognition phase is not even expensive because it's very low what you have to pay in the intellectual property office. For me, the technicality of the papers is something that is expensive. I think that is very difficult to codify the product uniqueness characteristics, who is going to be in and out, the negotiations, the compromise, whether, well, no one is going to be agreeing to a particular issue, the exact aspect of what is to be defined, what is to be representing that GI, and more specifically, the defining the boundaries of geographical indications, which I think is a general problem here, even in Europe. So for me, the pre-recognition phase is very difficult. What we are seeing in Latin America is many non-governmental organizations helping and doing workshops with local producers. And I think that is a good starting point. One of the questions put in there, which I saw, I scanned through, what was the most difficult thing that I could see in Latin America? And for me, it's the organization of those communities. And the second problem is trust, which was something that in the first question Arul raised, which is about trusting who is benefiting, and therefore the communities feel very apprehensive. In the majority of Latin American countries, you will say, well, Europe is the same, but it's not kind of the same, because in South America, the geographical indication, the owner will be the government, and as I said, the second point is about trust. The community will not trust the government to have that entitlement. Yes, in Europe it's the same. We have many public institutions that own, the government will own that. But again, society is not the same. Remember that we have terms that appears to be the same, but application is not. So we have to be very careful when we said the government is the proprietary of this particular certification. You can use it, but then they may change the boundaries of that restriction. And a final point that I want to make, that I also scanning through the question, was about when we talk about traditional knowledge, and Arul here is the expert on that. When we talk about traditional knowledge, please don't feel that it is codified, that's it. Traditional knowledge is moving. Every time, yes, it's passed through generations, but it doesn't mean that it's static. Geographical indications allow for that to move, because that could be amended. I mean, if we think about champagne, it's not exactly the same as it was produced 200 years ago. So it allows amendments to those associations of producers to change certain things. So I hope I touched upon some of the questions, Delphine. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a bit, I don't know if you have the case, Arul, in India for the Darjeeling tea, which has been applied by the Tea Board of India, but because they have put in the specification it will be only for 100% pure Darjeeling tea, actually the prices of that tea have increased, and there has been some benefit sharing along the value chain up to the tea plantation owners. Then what is not so easy is whether this benefit, of added value has been up to the workers working in the tea plantation, in the tea estates. But at least in the case of Darjeeling, there's been some benefit sharing up to the tea plantations, even though it's the tea board which is behind that geographical indication. So what is important is that the content of the specifications will be defined in coordination with the value chain stakeholders. They are the ones who know about the product, who know about the boundaries, who know about the method of production. And then for the monitoring, for the control, for the support in terms of quality management, it can be useful to have those boards, because the question in the chat is really about those boards. But of course, it has to be ensured that by the end, the added value goes to the farmers, and we even say the workers, because in those big plantations, the main issue is the workers, the laborers. How are they paid? Arun, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, so Delphine, I mean, thanks for bringing up the example of Darjeeling tea, because I mean, that example itself shows, I mean, why state shouldn't be in this business. Because why is the tea board managing Darjeeling tea? Can this be managed by the tea producers themselves? Similar is the case with respect to coffee board, right? So as you know, and as I have also seen from many of your studies with respect to coffee in India, yes, you have pointed out rightly that coffee board is owning those GAs, or coffee board is controlling those GAs. And in how many of those cases are benefits really going back to people who are cultivating coffee? And my answer there would be only in very, very limited number of cases. So the only way in which we can address this issue is, like, the state has to first step back. Second, the state has to empower the community. So maybe the community empowerment can be done through different, say, for example, non-governmental organizations and so on. But unless and until we empower them, the intended benefits of GA will never be achieved. And thanks again for bringing that Darjeeling tea example on this discussion. Thank you both for that.
You're welcome. Now, even the case of paper from Cambodia, the Comfort paper was very much supported by the Department of Intellectual Property, who provided the support. There was also a development project funded by France, actually, to support the collective organization of producers to set up the system. And after 5 to 6 years, they became sustainable. So maybe also we could consider it would be maybe something like, because we need to conclude, a final maybe convergence point, that we need to have the stakeholders of the value chain at the core of the GIs in terms of defining what is the GI, in terms of benefiting from the added value and other positive impact of the GI. But still, at the beginning, it might be necessary to have some support from NGOs, from local authorities, from boards, from projects, from whatever, the time for producers to be sustainable, to be autonomous. This also means there's a huge work of awareness about what can bring a geographical indication, how to organize this collective action. When you are in front of a group of 10,000 producers or 10,000 weavers, it's of course a long journey to have all them, you know, collaborating towards the same reputation, the same it's the same good, it's the same asset, this common asset, the reputation of the name of their products. But of course it takes time. That's a fascinating but quite very long journey. So I think we need to stop here, and I'm sure we all agree about this journey, which is fascinating, long, and about our role also ourselves in disseminating about this concept. What are the key points for their success in terms of involvement of value chain stakeholders, and in terms also of level of protection, which is better achieved through sui generis system or certification trademark. But it will be this for next encounter, maybe to go more into details about this legal system, which is more appropriate. But what we really all agree on is how necessary it is to put those local communities at the core of the system. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess now is my time.
Yes, yes, please.
To finish. So thanks very much there, Delphine. Thank you. You have run the discussion in a magnificent way, and it was not easy, yeah? And thanks also very much to Patricia, so energetic, yeah? To Arul. We have been able to see you all the time, so that's good. Yeah, connection was perfect. Yeah, and to Justin, yeah, who was in a minoritarian position but defended very well. Yeah, this was actually such an alive and fascinating discussion. 1 hour, 15 minutes passed just like that. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah? You know, there were more than 30 questions. We managed to answer several of them, but the others will be also answered in written. Yeah, I guess you will you will cooperate to answer the questions in order to get that all question is answered at the end. Yeah. All in all, my feeling is that there was so much food for thinking today. Yeah. And so many issues which merit each one a specific encounter. So, you know, we have encounters for decades and decades. Yeah. Let me summarize some of them which come now to my mind, which could constitute encounters per se. Yeah, you started, Delphine, asserting that there were 25 years after TRIPS. GIs are far from being harmonized. It is also true that it's a very young field of law. Yeah, I still remember, I'm old enough to remember that 30, 40 years ago, there were no practically GIs. Yeah, GIs are growing, but very little by little. Justin, yeah, you said it. But it's true also that each GI benefits for thousands and thousands of producers. Yeah. GI is not only protection. I was very moved by Patricia, yeah, fighting for the positive tool. Yeah, EIH is heritage. Yeah, GI is the relation with Earth. Yeah, it's people. Yeah, I should say it's cultural enhancement also. Yeah, there were attendants who were applauding very much this enthusiasm. Yeah. I have the feeling also that GIs provoked political fight within countries. India, yeah, you show it also, or between countries. PISCO, meaning of PISCO, and PISCO, for instance. We discussed the extension of GIs to any kind of products, not only non-food products. Yeah, I think you all were in favor, because perhaps it was the only thing you were completely in favor, but that's good also from time to time. It will show that they are not more than certification marks to protect specific communities. This was Justin, if I remember well, approach. Who is really benefiting from GIs was a question rounding out the whole day. How indigenous communities are coming together through the GIs, how GIs can be used also for spreading out and enhancing the indigenous communities feeling and proud. We dealt also with handicrafts. Yeah, handicrafts are essential for indigenous communities, also for enhancing environmental concern. If I recall well, you always brought it into the table. Yeah. You all agreed that handicaps should be enlarged in the future. It came also the question of certification marks and GIs. This is an issue which we could discuss in a single encounter in the future. Certainly, yeah. I have read a very pertinent question from a member of our family, Alexander von Mullendal, who put the emphasis on this matter. There have been dozens and dozens of, if I recall well, you said spaghetti balls, yeah? No. Trade agreements dealing with GIs. What's the meaning of that? There was also a fascinating discussion there. Is the United States showing in practice a contradictory position? This has been also an issue you have defended, Justin. Well, there were so many. I'm going to finish, but I still have several on my mind. Yeah, GI is an extraordinary and alive field. Yeah, and speakers from the US, from Venezuela, from France, and for India have shown it very clearly today. Let me please thank very specially today also our friend Professor Benedetta Ubertacci, because she has supported us enormously with the organization of this encounter. Benedetta has committed to lead as moderator our 13th encounter in June. Yeah, and there we will discuss, we'll come again, and we will discuss the impact of intellectual property in the world of traditional knowledge. Another exciting and relevant topic for sure. Yeah. Thanks very much also, as always, to all of you, to all hundreds of loyal members of the Encounters community who come back every month to enjoy with us. Yeah, for 1 hour and a little bit, but that's more than enough. So now it is time to close. it is time to announce the 12th encounter. It will be another amazing topic. Is IP and vaccines. I will read you the exact title as the race for the vaccine, from invention to effective vaccination, intellectual property as a tool or as a tool. This will happen on Tuesday, May 4th. Then I expect and I wait to all of you joining this wonderful team of academic and professionals from all over the world. We will have academics and professionals from France, from Israel, and from the United States. So hope you're doing fine. Hope you have enjoyed this discussion. And now it's time to digest it little by little and to enjoy the rest of the world. We all do expect to see you, all of you, on May 4th for our 12th encounter. So take care, please. Take care. Yeah. Have a nice morning, afternoon, evening, and night from all over the world. Thanks again, and see you in 4 weeks exactly. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.